Hey folks, how's it going? R&D Diesel here today, and I want to get this out of the way before you spend too much time watching this video. So yes, I did replace all of my fuel injectors. However, this video only covers the removal of the injectors on the driver's side. I was kind of pressed towards the end, and I really didn't have time to finish the whole thing in terms of the video. I kind of just needed to throw my truck back together. With that being said, if you can pull one fuel injector, you can probably pull them all. The big part to actually pulling your fuel injectors is going to be removing your valve covers. So this video doesn't cover everything there, but I do have another video if you check out my channel, R&D Diesel. I've got a lot of other videos up there as well. But in particular, take a look at the 94 to 97 7.3 Powerstroke Glow Plug Replacement, because in that video I do actually cover the in-depth process of removing the valve covers on both sides. Once you get those off, it's pretty easy to pull in fuel injectors. Anyways, back to the video. This time on R&D Diesel, we are exploring the intricacies of the 7.3 Powerstroke as we replace fuel injectors. You'd never before been seen footage of the inside of a 7.3, because today we're diving deep into the heart of the 7.3. Are you filming? Yeah, okay.
I'm R&D Diesel, and I drive a 7.3 almost every single day, except for when I'm driving a Chevrolet. I've dedicated over 6 years of my life to working on lawnmower engines, and that makes me uniquely qualified to work on the 7.3.
Okay, at this point I think you guys can see where this video is going, so let me go ahead and get one important thing out of the way here real quick. If there's anything you should take away from the video, it's this. Okay, so let's say you actually go ahead and replace your fuel injectors. There's one thing that you need to be concerned about, and that's with what happens if you have liquid and stuff that gets into the top of the cylinder. If you think about it, let's say you have your fuel injector, it's connected to a fuel rail and an oil rail. When you pull that out, even though you may have bled out the oil from the oil rail, there's still going to be a little bit of stuff that's going to fall into the top of your cylinder. Now, the issue is that that stuff is not compressible. You'll have things like oil, fuel, and brake cleaner from the case that you use that to clean out your injector cups. And because diesels have an inherently high compression ratio, there's a very small clearance that's formed between the top dead center of your piston and the top of the cylinder head. Now, normally that compression ratio is fine in the event that you're compressing air, because air is compressible. That's the principle behind how the diesel engines work. But if you try to compress oil, fuel, and other liquids, well, it's not exactly compressible. And if you have too much of that on top of your piston, it can cause a tremendous spike in force that can actually crack your pistons, snap connecting rods, and if you do snap a connecting rod, maybe even a hole in the block, and, well, you probably don't want to get a new engine. Point is, don't do it. So how do you avoid it? Well, the procedure is pretty simple. What you want to do is you want to go ahead and install your brand new fuel injectors and torque them down, get that all in, and then this is the last thing you do before you reinstall your valve covers. What you do is you remove all 8 of your glow plugs. The reason you'll do that is because it actually gives you a small passageway leading out of the cylinder for those liquids to be removed so that they can safely make their way out. Then what you'll do is you'll loosely set your valve covers on, or you can choose not to. So the point is, whenever you crank over, ultimately what you're going to be doing is you're going to crank over the engine with the starter, and it's going to crank over at a very high speed, and it's going to cause those liquids to make their way out through the glow plug hole. Now, this tends to make a bit of a mess in case you hadn't figured. So either you can set on the valve covers loosely to prevent the liquids from getting all over the engine bay. However, I actually chose not to do that whenever I replaced my injectors. The reason being was that I realized that I used some brake cleaner to clean out my fuel injector cups. And also there might be traces of fuel. And if you think about it, if you set the valve cover on, the only place for that stuff to go is back into the bottom where the oil pan is. And I figure that's not exactly good stuff to put in the oil. So I chose to leave the valve covers off. It made a big mess, but you know what? It's better than having to replace bottom end bearings and stuff of that nature. So then what you'll do is you can crank over the engine. I like to crank it over with a starter. I know a lot of people will crank over the engine with just by the pulley, but I figure using the starter is a lot better because you can spin it over at a lot higher speed, and it gives you a greater probability of getting all the liquid out of the top of the cylinders. Now, one thing that you can do is if you try to crank over the engine with the key, what it's going to be trying to do is it's going to try to actually fire the injectors, but they may not necessarily have fuel or oil on them, so you really don't want to do that when you're not ready to start the truck. So the way you get around that is you connect your batteries and you actually bypass the starter solenoid with a screwdriver. This is also a neat trick. If your starter solenoid goes out, you can actually get a screwdriver and put it over the two leads and basically close the circuit to bypass it and crank over your engine. And what you'll do there is you'll crank it over for a few seconds with that starter solenoid. That way it's not trying to fire those injectors and you don't have to worry about trying to start on you. Now after that, you get a whole mess. All you gotta do is just put the glow plugs back in and then finish putting everything together, and you should be good to go with your injectors. Now one thing too is to make sure that you do this bleeding procedure after you have installed the fuel injectors, because the thing is you've got your high pressure oil pump that's going to be trying to put oil back in the fuel rails, and if you don't have that injector there to keep the stuff from going back into the cylinder, well, it's just going to be a never-ending process if you try and get oil out, and just don't do it. Just make sure you have the injector fully seated in before you bleed all the stuff out of the system. Hope that helps, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the video. Good luck! You know, diving down into the science of the 7.3, it's really quite amazing when you think about it. You literally have one fluid pushing on another, and in the end, it goes bang. Now, if you've ever popped the hood of your 7.3, then you know that the injectors are well hidden. They're actually underneath the valve cover. In fact, the wiring harness that goes to these is really quite an ingenious design. It's actually part of the valve cover gasket itself. We're going to disconnect both batteries, because I don't trust electricity, and I don't think it trusts me either. I really should replace that cable one of these days. Alright, good enough. You know, the 7.3 at times can be a little bit unforgiving. Sometimes half the battle is actually just getting to the engine itself when it's that high off the ground. So we use innovative pieces of technology such as the chair, which is a really remarkable piece of equipment, and it makes the job that much more achievable. To start tackling this job, we're going to go ahead and remove the air intake. I found that using high-speed tools such as this dramatically reduces the time required to do tasks such as changing air intakes. You see, sometimes the 7.3 isn't the most easy to work on, so I have to go back to conventional tools, such as the screwdriver. Oh, man. It's through the combination of simple and complex tools that we can truly disassemble the 7.3 diesel engine. Using a fancy deep well 13mm socket, half-inch also works. Oh, man. We can fail to extract valve cover bolts. This is just one of the many challenges faced when working on a 7.3. Sometimes they're a little stubborn. Ah, dang it, there goes my socket. You see, 7.3s are tough, but we're tougher. We are 7.3 daily drivers. Yeah, you know, sometimes these things are a little bit stubborn to extract, but you can take it off with no worries at all. This is kind of a cover. That's just sitting on there. Holds the intake up more than anything. With the top nuts finally removed, we finally have access to the studs themselves. And this is where you really have to use a deep well socket. And these bolts here actually go into the valve cover itself. But you know, one of the things about this 7.3 is that they don't like to get dirt in them. Same with any engine. So you see these pieces of metal shavings from before, or all of this dirt around here? That's a big no-no for the 7.3. So what we're going to do is blow it off. We're going to use compressed air to clean off this valve cover. Stay tuned. Wow. Amazing piece of technology. You know, really all it is, you take atmosphere. You know, first invented back in the 1980s. This was a true innovation when it came out. Compressed air. There's a series of bolts all around here that I'm removing. It's pretty self-explanatory. They're pretty well distributed all around the valve cover. You just got to take some time to pull them off and be good to go. Yeah, we'll be good to go. Sometimes they're a little stubborn to get to, but it's okay. You know, one of the important things too while you're working on this is make sure you don't lose any bolts. Because if you lose bolts, it could be not very fun. So, very quickly it becomes evident that there are problems with the valve cover. I'm right over here by what people call the doghouse. This is where the crankcase ventilator is. But you can see there's a bolt hidden right back here. You see, one of the challenges here is that you can't quite get a socket on there because of the doghouse. Now you have two options. Either you can remove it with these two screws, but odds are it's only going to leak afterwards. You see, there's actually a set of O-ring seals inside of the doghouse that, if removed, they tend to expand and swell up, and they don't quite seal as well as they did before. And it causes oil to spew all over the place, and it makes a tremendous mess. So the easy solution is to use a wrench. Ow. Bust up your knuckles a little bit. Oh, well, come on. Get this. Go. Did it work? Come on, tell me it worked. Yahoo! It worked. It worked. Wow. That hurt. That really hurt. It's not wanting to happen. Bam! Just like that. For the most part, the bolts on the valve cover are pretty self-explanatory. That is, except for one. You see there's a bolt here in the very back. Let's take a look. Over here at the back of the 7.3 valve cover on the driver's side, we find a piece of historical evidence that this engine was not originally designed for this truck. You see there's actually a bolt jammed right back here. You can't get a wrench on it, so your only option is to use a small 1/4 inch drive. Take a look. Trouble light. Maybe that's right. It's going to be trouble. Stay there. Okay, try this out. Okay, we got this. Ow, come on. Trouble. Okay. So, this one doesn't like to give up very easy. So we've got to get this wrench back here. It's pretty much the only way that I found can remove this rear bolt. Using nothing more than your hands, you can feel around and just barely get the wrench on there. Come on. Ah! There we go. You see those words? Those words of encouragement really go a long way when it comes to working with bolts. You wouldn't think it, but just a little pep talk really loosens up the bolts and makes them feel comfortable with coming out. And this is one of those bolts that you want to be very quiet when you're working on it. Risk scaring it. It might run away and fall down, or it might make its way back into the hole it originally came from. So here we are. Just nice and easy. Pull on. There we go. Come on. Now there it is. Bolt came out. Whew! Without a hitch. Bam! And now for the moment that we've all been waiting for. The removal of the 7.3 valve cover. It's only now that we'll finally be able to see where the injectors are and what they look like. Stay tuned. You see, I found that these valve covers like to go ahead and leak anyways, so usually they don't have much holding them back. So I'm going to just kind of pull it off of there after the bolts are out. Lift up the back end, and it slides right out of there. Just like that. Nice and easy. So now you can finally see what we've been working for this whole time. This here is a 7.3 injector. And so is that one. And so is that. Right down there. Incredible. Really, really, just incredible. Those are the fuel injectors. But it's time that we start pulling them out. Okay, so next part, pulling off the valve cover gasket and all that. It's not too hard. There's actually just a set of clamps here that will pull off. So we got a screwdriver to help us out. Using a screwdriver, I found I'm able to actually lift up on these clips for the wiring harness. They come off like nothing. Just like that. You see, if you've got a Super Duty 7.3, you're a little more fortunate. You only have half as many clips to pull off the outside of the valve cover gasket. Just like that. You see, these valve covers themselves are quite an amazing piece of technology because they actually incorporate wires in with the valve cover gasket itself. It's genius. Like, I can't believe they actually thought of this back in the 90s. So we're going to go ahead and pull off these little wires onto the injector. Now, you're going to want to be careful with these. You're going to want to save them because your valve cover gasket's actually reusable, and if everything else is still in good shape, so is your wires. So, did I say that right? Or did I say it twice? I don't even know. Now I got that off. Now, these glow plugs, they have little butt connectors on them. They just kind of pull right up. And then we can pull this valve cover gasket out and relinquish it from its captivity. You know, now for sure you can see a much better idea. There it is, double A. Name of those injectors, because this is an early model truck. This is an old body style 7.3 I've got here. And it uses the standard AA injectors and 90cc flow rate and with a single shot injection. But next up, we're going to need to drain the oil rail. Stay tuned. Okay, after spending quite a bit of time here looking for how to drain the oil rails, you can see that there's actually a little tiny plug right there. You know, more than anything, I think this is testament that the 7.3 diesel is an engine that was actually designed to be worked on. They actually installed oil rail drain. Imagine that. Alright, so take a little coaxing again. This is a 1/8 inch Allen wrench I'm using. Oh, that actually came out pretty easy. Oh, come on. Well, I'll tell you, can't get the Allen key out. It's going to take a bit of working back and forth. Of course, we'll also want to make sure we don't drop this plug. But you can see this long cylinder right here that runs along the length of the cylinder head. That is actually, yes, actually, the oil rail. You see, the sole purpose of this oil rail is to actually hold high-pressure oil to feed the injectors. That high-pressure oil, of course, is fed by the high-pressure oil pump. Go figure. Okay, make sure I don't drop that. And wow, just a little wimpy amount of oil is kind of coming out. Well, that's kind of not impressive. Let's go ahead and pull together an oil rail now. Plug out. Let's see. Okay, there's another one. Just a bit further back. You can see it right at the edge of the screen right there on the top right hand corner. Ow! Ow, that hurt. These things finally go, they go. Wow. Now you can see there, just barely some oil coming out. A little hole right there. There There it is. Barely make it out right there. That's oil coming out of the oil rail. Wow, amazing. Look at this here. You can see just how truly black that oil is coming out of the oil rail. You know, it would be kind of startling to know that this is actually fresh oil that I put in this truck. In fact, I changed the oil in this truck not more than 100 miles ago. And yet, the oil in the oil rail is pitch black. You know, a lot of people say that you don't need to worry about changing the oil in your high-pressure oil pump. But if that isn't evidence that sludge builds up in your oil rails, then I don't know what does. Alright, so let me go ahead and show you guys the process of what all is involved to remove a 7.3 injector. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and remove this little spill port here. These things are pretty tight in here. So I'm going to get some more leverage. It's a wonderful piece of technology that is leverage itself. It allows you to do work and exert a torque that otherwise you could never do. There we go. Pulls right out of there. Nice and easy. It's a pretty long bolt, so we'll just go ahead and pull her out. Okay, everybody pull that spill port out. Set it off to the side. So next there's actually a bolt right underneath here. And it actually holds down a clamp that you can move out of the way. And it's actually that clamp that's holding down your injector. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this using what appears to be a 5/16 inch wrench. 5/16 inch socket. 6 point, of course. Now this isn't too tight at all. It just takes a little finagling to get it out. Okay. Oh no. Okay, thankfully that was just my socket. Well, I don't need any more. There it is, got that little bolt out of there. And next, there's this clamp. Okay, so now we're looking down at the top of the injector, and you can see that this little clip to hold it down is now loose. Now at this point, I'm going to set down a rag to protect my cylinder head. I'm going to push up on the bottom of this clip, and I'm going to use a screwdriver to leverage it out. Things can be pretty stuck in here sometimes. So just so you guys can see, there is in fact another bolt up top here. And this is why it's so important that you slide the clamp up enough to clear the bolt, so that otherwise you're not trying to rip out a bolt as well. Well, I mean, it's super easy. It just came right up. What are we doing? Alright, now it's a little stuck. It's a clamp. Lift it up. And pull the injector the rest of the way out. Ooh, just like that. Interesting. As you can see right here, I actually put a rag inside the hole for the injector. The intent here now is to keep dirt and whatever garbage you don't want inside the engine to stay out, while we wait overnight to finish this job tomorrow. We finally made it to where we got all the injectors out of the truck. There is one last thing that we need to get out of the way. If you take a look at the tip of every single one of these fuel injectors is a nice piece from antiquity, a copper washer. Now every single one of these injectors should have a copper washer on it, and if it doesn't, well, odds are it's still stuck inside the cylinder head, and you've got to get that out, because otherwise the new injectors will never seat quite right. As we continue our venture into the heart of this 7.3, there is one last thing we need to be careful. You see, these injector cups can sometimes get tons of grit and grime inside of them. So using nothing more than a very clean shop towel and some brake cleaner, such as this stuff here, we're actually able to clean out the injector cups as clean as we can possibly get them using a screwdriver and a rag, and that seems to work out quite well. But there is one last thing we need to be careful of. You see, there's actually a very small hole inside of the injector cup where the injector nozzle actually passes through into the engine. It's through that hole we have direct exposure to the cylinder itself. You can see it right down there, nice and hidden. And if we're not careful, we can actually hydrolock the engine, crack pistons, and have a whole world of mess. So the solution is use advanced technology of the shop vac. Now, using this extremely specialized tool that uses a piece of hose connected to the end of a shop vac, we're actually able to clean out the cylinder itself. Now, if this trouble light would stop giving me trouble, we could actually get this done. Anyways, the way this works is we take the end of this tube, and it actually goes all the way inside into the cylinder where we can extract the juice that otherwise would threaten the life of our engine. So now that we have the tube finally set inside of the cylinder, we can engage the shop vac. You can see as I'm sticking this hose down in there, it's going to start extracting lots of goop. It's all the brake cleaner that we had pushed in there originally. Now we can get it all out. And just like that, it's good to go. I'm trying to start my 97 Ford F350 with a 7.3 Powerstroke. First start on stage 1 injectors with the 160cc capacity and stock nozzles. I just got it to fire a little bit here and figured I'd go ahead and start recording it. Things got smoke like the dickens.